Hello and welcome. Tonight, small aircraft on test flight crashes and bursts into flames on a road in the Ikeja area of Lagos State. 2 persons on board rescued. Acting Inspector General of Police warns against violent protests ahead of tomorrow's planned nationwide action by organised labour over impact of fuel subsidy removal. And Presidential Election Petition Court reserves judgment in the petitions filed against the victory of President Tinubu as the LP and PDP as well as parties adopt their arguments.
On business news tonight, business confidence in Nigeria drops to lowest level in recorded history, according to latest PMI reading for Stanbic IBTC.
On sports news tonight, England thrashed China to surge into the Women's World Cup knockout stages and set up a last 16 meeting with Nigeria.
From Abuja, the nation's capital, Governor Umaru Fintiri blames Sunday's looting of NEMA warehouses in Yola, the Adamawa state capital, on politicians bent on distracting his government as police arraign the suspects in court.
And in international news from London, Moscow's mayor says a skyscraper in Russia's capital has been attacked by a drone for the second time in 2 days.
It was a bolt out of the blue, a small aircraft set to be on a test flight that suddenly sent an eerie flash above and crashed, bursting into flames in the Oba Akre and Ikeja area of Lagos State today. In what could be described as an act of God, 2 people on board the aircraft were rescued following the crash, which occurred at about 3:30 p.m. and rushed to a military hospital. Other emergency responders from the Lagos State Emergency Management Agency, as well as the Nigerian Safety Investigation Bureau, as well as the National Emergency Management Agency, mobilized to the scene.
We had a distress alert on the crash, though the distress alert did not indicate the area. It first of all told us within the domestic airports 1. So all of us were geared towards the airport before we got here. So by the time we got here, the community had done the job for us. Saving life is very, very important. And to save air crash victims is between 5 to 10 minutes lifespan. And between that 5 minutes, the job had been done. The community were able to rescue the 2 crew members on board.
Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu was also on hand to see things for himself.
I think it was a single engine helicopter that had 2 passengers on board. The 2 passengers on board have been rescued safely. They are currently at an hospital and they are receiving treatment as we speak. We do not know the cause of the helicopter crash. That will be done by experts. That will be done by AIB, which are the investigative bureau. But we're thankful that we got a very quick response, both from the Lagos State Emergency Service, LASEMA, and all you residents of this neighborhood. Especially, I'm told, 2 very gallant citizens, Oluwafemi and what's your own name? Okpeyemi and Oluwafemi. Whilst everybody were running away, Okpeyemi and Oluwafemi were the very first that I'm told had to look for water from the running water in the gutter, and they were able to also help to rescue the 2 passengers that were inside the helicopter. But of course, subsequently, you could see that the crash site have been secured. All of the wreckage have been evacuated and they're in a truck right now, and they'll be transported officially to and hand over to the Nigerian Aviation Authority.
A close shave indeed. But away from that incident, it is unclear if the planned protest by organised labour unions in the country over the removal of petroleum subsidy will go ahead tomorrow. A meeting today between the Presidential Steering Committee on Palliatives and representatives of organised labour continued today in Abuja to resolve the impasse between both parties. Our State House correspondent Larry Lasisi reports that representatives of the unions have agreed to consult with their members to reach a consensus on the next course of action.
Members of the Presidential Steering Committee on Palliatives on Monday evening leaving the room after adjourning the meeting to watch the national broadcast by President Bola Tinubu.
We are going to spend 75 billion between July 2023 and March 2024.
Tuesday afternoon, members of the committee reconvened to continue their meeting. Hours later, they conclude, and what they agree on appears to be in favor of the nation.
We appealed to Labour. We did appeal to Labour to call up their protest for tomorrow. We found listening ears here, and they did agree that they all accepted that Mr. President's broadcast was a welcome development, and that they'll go back home to talk to the other leaders that are not present today. So we're hopeful that they will do the right thing and call off the strike tomorrow.
The Labour leaders highlight what seems to be their own angle to the agreement.
The government team told us that what the president has put on the table, it's more or less like a starting point and it's a baseline. So we, on our part, also said yes, that we would have been surprised if that is everything that will be put forward, because for us, we felt that there are some gaps. For us, we felt that if the president has said that 1 trillion naira has been saved in the last 2 months, that what has been proposed is not far-reaching. And that for us, as part of the principle of negotiations, when anything is put on the table, you accept, but you push for more. You ask something about the protest. Yes, they also appealed that we should shelve the protest. Our response was that we are going to go back this evening and also have a conversation around that, and you will hear from us at the end of that conversation.
The government came with an appeal of shifting the intended protest tomorrow. We say no, this is not something that for us to discuss here, because we have other organs of the union that we have to go back and look at it critically, because the truth is that the truth remains facts that every Nigerian out there is waiting, boiling out there to see what will come out of this very meeting. And we have to go back and maybe make presentation to them that this is what government have said and this is what we are thinking we should go about it. So this is the situation we are now.
It's now a waiting game with all eyes on organized labor to see what their next move will be. Larry Lasisi, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, ahead of tomorrow's mass rally over the fuel subsidy removal, the police authorities are warning against any form of hijack of the proposed action called by the organised labour. The acting Inspector General of Police, Kaide Gbetukun, says he is deeply concerned about recent developments regarding the planned nationwide protest, but urges all parties involved to ensure that the demonstrations are conducted in a peaceful manner. In a statement signed by the force's public relations officer, Muyiwa Adejobi, the police boss orders all the commissioners of police in charge of various commands and supervisory assistant inspectors general of police to engage in fruitful discussions with the leadership to foster understanding and reach a common ground. It adds that a coordinated approach is crucial to achieving meaningful solution and wants the union to prevent any form of violence or disruptions to public order should the protests persist. Meanwhile, members of the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, working at the Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Commission today, took to the streets to protest what they described as poor working conditions, addressing journalists in Abuja after picketing the headquarters of the commission. The branch chairman, Mr. Okechukwu Anya, explained that the management of the commission has been unresponsive to the demands of the association.
All of us, why we are gathered here. What we are doing here today is a peaceful protest of our welfare that has been neglected for so long. We have a situation where pension deductions are done and are not remitted to the respective PFAs. You have a situation where our staff who have assessed our cooperatives and deductions have been made from their payments, but management have refused to remit those deductions to the cooperative, and the staff are made to bear extra penalties for the late disbursement of those cooperatives, and this is over 5 months. We have a situation where our offices in Port Harcourt do not have light for over a month. We are talking about the defunct DPR that was a standard in the industry, and you have that has metamorphosed to NUPRC that's supposed to be the African leading regulators. We have offices in Port Harcourt that do not have light for over 1 month. Companies come for meeting and they open the windows. We have office in Lagos where staff cannot access basic and potable water. Management has refused to provide for us a conducive working environment. And we say no because these are anti-labor practices.
Well, still on the story, we understand that the Nigeria Labour Congress have said without a doubt that they have neither reconsidered nor suspended the nationwide protest. And they want to inform all Nigerians that having reasoned from that meeting earlier today with the federal government that the outcome of the meeting, they've not changed anything or the course which they have set for themselves tomorrow as custodians of the interests and desires of the Nigerian workers and people. They're advising Nigerians to ignore the work of fifth columnists who they say are working hard against the wishes of the people, and saying that they are going ahead with their strike. Their demands, they say, are the immediate implementation in good faith of the resolutions with the Congress jointly signed with government and the TUC, immediate reversal of all anti-poor policies of government, including the recent hike in PMS price, school fees and VAT. More demands, they say, fixing the local refineries in Port Harcourt, Warri and Kaduna, the release of 8 months withheld salaries of university lecturers and workers. They're saying that, of course, the federal government should accord appropriate recognition and support to the Presidential Steering Committee and the work of its subcommittees, among others. Well, Nigeria's main opposition party, the People's Democratic Party, they've described the president's national address on Monday as hurriedly put together to deceive unsuspecting Nigerians. National Publicity Secretary of the PDP, Mr. Debo Ologunagba, told journalists at a news conference in Abuja that the promises made by the president on how his administration will ameliorate the plight of Nigerians in the face of petrol subsidy removal are opener for the looting of public funds.
The PDP is appalled that the address is another litany of false promises hurriedly put together by his handlers in the desperate bid to hoodwink and beguile Nigerians, blackmail labor fronts, and divert public attention from the life discounting experiences imposed by the APC government. The PDP holds that Senator Tinubu's speech is a horrifying reminder of APC bogus promises under him as national leader in 2015, which include promised 3 million jobs per year, making Naira equal in value to the US dollar, provisions of small business loan guarantee schemes to create at least 5 million new jobs by 2019, all without concrete policy and implementation plan, and which at best are opening for corrupt patronage and siphoning of public funds.
In part two, after the break, Federal High Court in Lagos grants leave to the suspended Central Bank Governor, Gordon Emefiele, to serve his bail ruling on the Director General of the DSS, Mr. Yusuf Bichi. That's in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10, coming to you live from Channels Television. A reminder of our top stories. Small aircraft on test flight crashes and bursts into flames on a road in the Ikeja area of Lagos. 2 persons on board rescued. Acting Inspector General of Police warns against violent protests ahead of tomorrow's planned nationwide action by organised labour over the impact of fuel subsidy removal. And Presidential Election Petition Court reserves judgment in the petitions filed against the victory of President Tinubu as the LP and PDP as well as parties adopt their arguments. And Moscow's mayor says a skyscraper in Russia's capital has been attacked by a drone for the second time in 2 days. To the National Assembly, where 22 out of the 28 ministerial nominees sent by the President have been screened by the Senate. The screening continued for the second day today, starting with the Deputy Leader of the Senate, who also was the former Governor of Ebonyi State, Mr. David Mahi. His section was quite brief, as he was allowed, according to them, take a bow and go. It was closely followed by the nominee from Ogun State and former Commissioner of Finance, Mr. Wale Edun, and then the immediate past Governor of Kaduna State, Malam Nasir El-Rufai, both of whom took turns to speak on their plans.
Leaders of the GDP per capita of Nigeria was higher than that of China as recently as 1990. Today, Chinese per capita income is $13,000 nearly. Nigeria's is just over $2,000. So you can see the gap that has opened up. And the reason why was that production growth was stalled by insecurity, by inflation, and by wasteful government expenditure to a large extent. However, in the last 2 months, there really has been a turnaround in the Nigerian economy, which is room for tremendous optimism. The senator from Ogun, Otumba Benga Daniel, talks about debt. When you look at what has happened with revenue, it is like having a bucket with a hole in it and pouring water in it. The minute you block the hole, the revenue piles up. I'm sure your state governors will tell you that their fiscal situation has turned around, and same with the federal government. It's not quite a question of having so much money that is a question of how do we spend it. But I assure you, there will be a continuous improvement in the fiscal situation at the federal and the state level, and that takes care of the debt situation. Owing is not a bad thing as long as you have the revenue to service. And it was and is the commitment of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to curtail spending, to curtail inefficiencies, and also to stay within the law in terms of borrowing to finance government operations.
Right now, Nigeria has about 13,000 megawatts of installed generation capacity, but we hardly do more than 4,000 or 5,000 megawatts. So to improve generation, the first order of business is to look at what is constraining the full production of electricity from these 13,000 megawatts. Why do we have 13,000 installed and only 5,000 being produced? Many of the generation stations cannot produce because of poor supply of gas. 80% of our generation is from gas, and the balance is hydro. The gas-fired stations often don't have supply of gas. There are power stations that have been completed 2 or 3 years ago, and they have produced nothing because there is no gas supply. So that's another thing that must be addressed. We must ensure that gas and power are together under one roof for this issue of gas supply, which has persisted for over 20 years, to be resolved.
Meanwhile, 2 female ministerial nominees, Stella Okotete and Hannatu Musawa, also appeared before the Senate today, where they shared on how they hope to add value to governance in Nigeria.
While in Nexim, I'll tell you that I noticed that there was a short in our export, especially with our commodity exports. Commodity exports in Nigeria, when we resumed, was at its lowest. And we noticed that export of commodities in its raw form means we're exporting labor and we're receiving nothing but very little earnings in FX. And to grow the sector, we decided to introduce products that would add value and export. Today, under our leadership, the leadership of Abubakar Bello and my humble self and my other colleague Bala Bello, we're able to initiate the PAVE agenda, the produce, add value and export. Today we are producing cashew nuts from Nigeria and exporting. We're also processing other agricultural products for export. My vision for Nigeria aligns with the renewed hope agenda of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the aspirations of our great nation to diversify our economy, to strengthen governance, to promote sustainable development and foster strong global partnership, which I firmly believe.
I grew up as a daughter of parents that cherished learning and believed in the power of justice to transform lives. The foundation bequeathed to me by the parents and community that brought me up planted in me a lifelong commitment to pursuing truth, fairness, and equality. Politics may mean different things to different people, but it has become another avenue for me to drive change. As reluctantly as I am to call myself a politician, however, when one has been an active participant in the political game for 21 years, one is forced to come to terms with the fact that, yeah, honey, you probably are a politician.
And to the judiciary now, the Presidential Election Petition Court has reserved judgment in the petitions filed by the PDP and Labour Party's presidential candidates against the victory of President Bola Tinubu in the 2023 presidential election. Today's hearing majorly was for the parties to adopt all their various arguments, which were already before the court. Our correspondent Emmanuel Ekele reports.
Lawyers in the petition of the People's Democratic Party and its presidential candidate, Atiku Abubakar, converged on the courtroom at the Presidential Election Petition Court for the adoption of final written address. This is the last leg before judgment is delivered. Atiku Abubakar, alongside his entourage, is physically present to witness the day's proceedings. At the resumed hearing, Mr. Atiku, through his lawyer, Chris Uche, alleges that despite the 355 billion naira received for the conduct of the election, INEC deliberately bypassed all the technological innovations it introduced for the purpose of the 2023 general elections. They contended that INEC acted in breach of the amended Electoral Act when it refused to electronically transmit results of the presidential election. However, all the respondents, through their lawyers, prayed the court to dismiss the petition as grossly lacking in merit. INEC, through its legal team, led by Mr. Abubakar Mahmood, maintains that contrary to claims by the petitioner, the glitch experienced during the election was not a deliberate human interference to manipulate results. President Tinubu's lawyer, Wole Olanipekun, argues that the petitioners failed to establish why the presidential election should be nullified. He described Atiku as a meddlesome interloper, only challenging the conduct of INEC and not making a case against the declared winner. After it had listened to other parties, the Justice Amani-led panel reserved judgment to a date that will be communicated to other parties.
As you can see today, we all adopted our final written addresses, which are our final submissions in this case, summarizing all the evidence we tendered before the court. You saw all the witnesses we called, all the exhibits we tendered. So today, we now summarized and adopted our submissions.
Next case is the petition of the Labour Party. The presidential candidate of the party, Mr. Peter Obi, alongside his running mate, Dati Baba Ahmed and Chimamanda Adichie, are physically present. On the issue of non-compliance, lawyer for INEC, Abubakar Mahmood, said the respondents misunderstood what was introduced and the purpose. He further adds that the over 18,000 blood results uploaded on the portal is a non-issue. It did not suggest that the physical copies of the results were also blood. On the issue of the 25% in Abuja, Mahmood says using it as a yardstick to nullify an election is giving it an undue elevation above other states. While adopting their final written address, lawyers to President Tinubu, Wole Olanipekun, and the APC, Lateef Fagbemi, held that Peter Obi should not participate in a rerun election should the court grant the prayers of the petitioners because he came third in the presidential election. While adopting his final written address, lawyer to Peter Obi, Levi Uzuaku, held that the respondents have labored in vain to degrade the importance of their IREV.
There are so many grounds we presented, so it's for the courts to decide. So, but what is important is that we sufficiently presented our case in a most convincing manner.
The wait is now on as the Presidential Election Petition Court adjourns hearing on the petitions of the Labour Party, the PDP and the APM for a date to be announced later to determine the fate of President Bola Tinubu on his victory at the presidential election. From the Presidential Election Petition Court, Emanuela Ekele, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the candidate of the All Progressives Congress, APC, in the March 2023 Rivers State governorship election, Mr. Toye Cole, has closed his case before the Election Petitions Tribunal sitting in Abuja. Mr. Cole, who appeared as a star witness, claimed that despite being prevented from physically inspecting materials needed to prosecute the petition and other attempts by the PDP to frustrate his case, he has successfully established the malpractices that occurred during the election. Lawyer to the petitioner, Mr. Tsunderu Edu, who applauded the tribunal for their painstaking efforts in attending to the petition, said his team is ready to take on the defense team on Friday, August the 11th, which is the next adjourned date. And we're off to Abuja for more stories. Victor Matthias is waiting. Hi, Victor.
Hello, Millicent. Welcome to Abuja, where we continue with legal matters. Now, the Federal High Court in Lagos has granted leave to the suspended Central Bank of Nigeria Governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, to serve on the Director General of the Department of State Services, Mr. Yusuf Magaji Bichi, the court's ruling admitting him to bail. Justice Nicholas Owebo specifically granted Emefiele permission to publish the bail ruling delivered on July the 25th in 3 national newspapers circulating within the court's jurisdiction. It was gathered that the move is preparatory to a contempt proceedings against the DSS and its Director General. Through his lawyers, the suspended CBN governor had filed the ex parte application on July the 28th, seeking to advertise the court's ruling following his rearrest by operatives of the DSS. Justice Owebo had granted Emefiele bail in the sum of 20 million naira, with one surety in like sum, after the federal government arraigned him on a 2-count charge of illegal possession of firearms and ammunition. And about 110 suspects arrested over Sunday's looting of the NEMA warehouses in Yola, the Adamawa state capital, have been arraigned before a magistrate court in the state capital. They were charged with criminal conspiracy, housebreaking, theft, public disturbance, and criminal intimidation with dangerous weapons. The suspects, made up of men and women, were later remanded at the Yola Correctional Center after pleading not guilty to the 5-count charge. Meanwhile, the Adamawa State Governor, Umaru Fintiri, believes the crisis that led to the looting of the NEMA palliatives warehouses were not instigated by economic crunch alone. According to him, investigations suggest that there is a major element of politics to the chaos just to distract the government from serving the people. The governor stated this during a statewide broadcast in which he urged those that were part of the looting to return the items to the nearest police station or be ready to face the wrath of the law.
Governor Umaru Fintiri cut short his official trip outside Adamawa and returned to Yola, the state capital. On arrival, he went to the vandalized NEMA warehouses, accompanied by his deputy, Professor Khaled Tapwa Farota, and heads of security units and NEMA officials in the state to assess the extent of damage for himself. The Commissioner of Police outlines the efforts made by the security agencies and what they considered the target of the hoodlums.
It's a kind of rumor, believing that palliatives were kept here and the government is refusing to distribute them. Unfortunately, it wasn't like that. Yeah, we put executive mayors on ground to foster the police, the Nigerian Army, the DSS, the Civil Defense. We put every mayor to make sure that this place was not broken into, but unfortunately, they had to break the fence for them to gain access to the warehouse.
Governor Fintiri considers the looting as a criminal act. He promises to go after the perpetrators.
90 of them have been arrested. We're profiling them. Their perpetrators also will be identified, and we're prosecuting them today. And if for any reason we also have link to their perpetrators, they will also join. We will ensure that everybody is brought to book and brought to justice.
Done with the assessment, the governor goes into a meeting with the heads of security agencies. He addresses the residents of Adamawa after the meeting to assure them of the commitment of government to their well-being. He, however, has a message for the looters of the government warehouses.
Investigations are still ongoing. Preliminary findings from the investigation suggest that beside the purported claim to the economic crunch, which is propelled by the imminent trend of criminality, is the inducement of some lazy politicians in among us. There are some of us who contested and lost election and feels that the only way to play their bitter politics is to distract us by inducing trouble that will sap our energy. We shall deal decisively with anyone who aided and abetted this callous slide into anarchy.
The governor stresses that as a responsible government, it is sensitive to the harsh economic realities and has therefore put measures in place to cushion the effects of the hardship on the people. He appealed for calm, even as normalcy has been restored in the state.
And now the Nigeria Immigration Service says it is working with its partners to address the shortage of booklets for international passports. The Acting Controller General of the service, Mrs. Caroline Adepoju, said this during an event to mark the 60th anniversary of the service. Mrs. Adepoju adds that the service is evolving into a modern, effective and efficient service that will be manned by well-trained and motivated officers. And that's it from the nation's capital. It's back to Millicent in Lagos.
Thanks, Victor. And we continue that the president has returned to Abuja after attending the 63rd independence anniversary of the Republic of Benin. President Bola Tinubu, who was accompanied on the one-day visit by 6 governors, his personal aides, was invited to the event as the special guest of President Patrice Talon of the Republic of Benin. More recently, the 2 presidents met at the State House along with leaders of 3 other West African nations, where the Benin Republic president invited him for the anniversary. In the meantime, the United Kingdom says it looks forward to helping Africa achieve her goals of leading on the world stage, becoming a permanent member of the United Nations, and achieving political, economic stability and prosperity. This is part of the British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly's foreign policy speech for Africa, delivered in Lagos today. Our foreign affairs correspondent Amarchi Ubani was there and reports.
Walking gingerly into the room filled with members of Nigeria's business community, media owners and practitioners, and a small group of diplomats, the British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly quickly establishes his connection with Africa, revealing his mother was Sierra Leonean, and though he does not play favorites with continents, Africa is his best.
But if I did, it would be Africa.
He then delves into reasons why the UK has interest in a continent whose population will reach 2 billion by 2050, half of whom will be under the age of 25.
We want and need better functioning international financial systems. We want and need permanent African representation on the UN Security Council. We want and need the African Union to become a member of the G20 because we want and we need the sheer demographic heft of African countries to be appropriately recognised in international organisations so that we can shape the future of the world in partnership with African countries.
He spoke about multilateral reforms that will help Africa achieve her goals, including the contributory role of women, which he says drives economic development, before setting out plans for Africa over the next few years.
A real uplift in growth and prosperity cannot come without an increase in international trade. And that's why our developing countries trading scheme will extend tariff cuts to hundreds of more products exported from developing countries in Africa and elsewhere. This means that 98% of goods imported from Africa into the UK will enter duty-free, and new rules of origin will help the least developed economies integrate into global supply chains. Increased trade stimulates partnerships, and our collective power today, the power of African countries and the UK together, is founded on the quality and the number of our partnerships. Only together can we adequately address shared challenges. Only together can we harness opportunities, and only together can we improve living standards.
Mr. Cleverly highlights the importance of both sides, that's Africa and the UK, working together to achieve economic development, especially through the UK-Africa Summit coming up in April next year. Though there are many unpredictable outcomes, such as the war in Ukraine, the coup in Niger, and security on the continent, the UK government, he says, will continue to support already existing projects with partners to accelerate progress towards shared objectives. Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News.
We're in Edo State, where the government says it is deepening reforms in the agriculture sector in its drive to diversify the state's economy. Part of this drive is the planned human capital development through the College of Agriculture, which is set to open in August, and the agriculture hub being set up in Benin City. The cassava to ethanol production value chain and the state oil palm project are other areas of focus that have attracted investors.
One of the creations fueled by the Edo State government's pursuit of economic diversification is the Edo State Investment Promotion Office.
We have investors lining up for rubber, we have investors for cassava, for maize, for rice. We have investors now even coming in for cashew. So we as an investment arm, what we do really is to facilitate, to ensure that investments that are coming in and investors that want to come and locate, they are very happy with what we are doing as a state.
The Edo State Oil Palm Project, ESOP, and the cassava to ethanol production value chain are some areas in which the government has sought and attracted investors to the state.
We have the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil, which is RSPO. So that is the standard that the state government is using, or has mandated the oil palm investors to comply with. So the RSPO standards talks about people, talks about the planet, and talks about prosperity.
At the cassava farm of Green Hills Agri Products, it's harvest season.
The starch content of our products is above the national average, above the standard. The national average is about 13 tons per hectare, but we are getting about 25 tons per hectare.
Governor Godwin Obaseki, during a recent visit to the Saru Oil Palm Limited Farm in Ewusi community, Oriamo local government area, says the goal of making the state an oil palm hub was becoming a reality.
The significance of this project, it's not just the cultivation of oil palm here, it's the process. People can now see it is possible to have large-scale estate farming, which we haven't done in many years, and those we have used to be the preserve of only expatriate firms. We are now seeing Nigerian companies cultivate huge expanse of land.
The College of Agriculture and Natural Resources, Igwerehi, was not left out in the reforms.
The management staff has employed the rector, the bursar, the librarian, and to be precise, another 208 staffs.
Our members have 100,000 hectares that they are developing. We need 16,600 workers. And this school cannot come at a better time.
There's also the Agri-Hub in Benin City, the state capital, intended as a one-stop shop for agricultural services.
Time for business news now. Here's Anne Wilder.
Thank you, Millicent. Hello and welcome to Business News. Nigeria's lowest confidence fell to its lowest level in the history in July, and due to the impact of steep prices and pressure on the private sector. Well, according to the latest Purchasing Managers Index report released by leading financial institutions, Stanbic IBTC, the reading, which fell to 51.7 last month, marked a decline from 53.2 in the month of June, but it remained above the 50-point threshold for the fourth consecutive month. At the same time, both output and new orders experienced a slowdown in growth for the last month, reaching the weakest rate since the sector returned to expansion after the cash crisis earlier this year. It's also the impact of weaker new orders and business activities negatively affected overall demand, with rising input as a major concern, while increase in output was the softest in the current 4-month sequence. Stanbic IBTC's survey also shows the higher fuel costs due to subsidy removal and exchange rate weakness all led to further steep increase in purchase costs amid renewed rise in new export orders, while efforts to expand capacity led to further rise in employment last month. FSD Africa Investments, in collaboration with InfraCredit, has invested £10 million into its first-of-its-kind risk-sharing backstop facility, which is designed to unlock local currency funding for sustainable infrastructure development right here in Nigeria. Well, that risk-sharing backstop facility will address the challenge of low credit enhancement by mobilizing local institution investment via bonds into viable early-stage or greenfield climate-aligned infrastructure projects. The Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry has commended President Bola Tinubu's recent State of the Nation address, where he announced easing the short-term economic challenges faced by Nigerians due to the subsidy removal and exchange rate harmonization. In a statement released by its president, Michael Olawale Cole, the LCCI also lauded the allocation of 500 billion naira package for stimulating the economy through measures like transport, cost reduction, manufacturing support, and conditional grants to small businesses. Let's head to the domestic market now, where it sustained its bearish run into the first trading day of August. John Mekwa has the details.
Thank you so much, Anne. And welcome to the Stock Market Report. Well, profit taking continued at the NGX today, and we see the all-share index is still in the red. Not as red as yesterday, 0.23% at 64,192.20. And the market cap not looking good because it's lost at 35 trillion naira, 34.9 trillion naira. This is an indication that the grip of the bear is even tighter on the NGX. Well, that sound means that 79 billion naira has been taken away from the total market value, but there are still winners. That's the good thing about all of this. And we see the leading winner for today is Dangote Sugar. Dangote Sugar lost again 10% to close at 29 naira 70 kobo. And of course, we have other winners. Also, looking at the flip side, of course, there'll always be, if there's a winner, there'll be a loser. Leading that is John Holt. John Holt also shared 10%. That's the max any stock could go up or down and close at 1 naira 80 kobo. So it's a red market now for second day, 3 days last week. But the good thing is it's an opportunity for someone to hop into the market. And I always challenge Anne, and this may be your opportunity to invest in the NGX.
That's Business News. Thank you for watching. I'm Anne Nwawado. The rest of the news at 10 continues now with Millicent.
Thanks, Anne. Police in Sierra Leone have arrested several people, including high-ranking soldiers suspected of planning a takeover of power. Reports say the police's swift response prevented a potential overthrow of President Julius Bayo's democratically elected government. The police headquarters in Freetown issued a statement on Monday confirming the arrests and ongoing investigations. It's Simon Puter with more on this and other international stories and around the world in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the channel's studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Moscow's mayor says a skyscraper in Russia's capital has been attacked by a drone for the second time in 2 days. Several drones were shot down across the city overnight. Russia's defense ministry blames Ukraine for the latest attacks, but Kyiv has made no comment. An advisor to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia will see what he described as more unidentified drones in the future. France is preparing to evacuate its citizens from the West African nation of Niger because of anti-French sentiment following last week's coup. It is said it will also help other European nationals to leave. The coup has prompted demonstrations against the former colonial power, with the French embassy coming under attack. Meanwhile, a security analyst has warned that the overthrow of Niger's president, Mohamed Bazoum, could make the country ripe for the Wagner Group and jihadist groups as the crisis pits Niger's former Western allies against the likes of Russia and other junta leaders in the region.
It gives them another opportunity to step in, get paid for their services, and make themselves relevant again. Because after what happened a few weeks ago in Russia, obviously there's been a huge question mark about what is the relevance of the Wagner Group, who actually controls them, and what is their role in participating and or influencing global politics.
17 people have died and 3 have been injured after a crane collapsed at the site of an under-construction bridge in Shahapur, about 70 kilometers north of the city of Mumbai in India. The victims are mostly construction workers and site engineers. The police, fire brigade and National Disaster Response Force have been deployed in rescue operations at the site. Rescue personnel are looking for others trapped under the crane after it collapsed. The state government has announced an inquiry. The former Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi has been pardoned in 5 of 19 charges brought against her by the military. The pardon, part of a seasonal amnesty, will reduce her 33-year jail sentence by 6 years. Former President Win Myint, who was ousted along with Ms Suu Kyi, also received a reduced jail sentence after getting 2 of his charges pardoned. Periodic amnesties have been announced before, but this is the first time they have included Ms Suu Kyi and Mr Myint. At least 11 people have died and 13 others are missing in torrential rains in Beijing as China braces for the 3rd typhoon in as many weeks. The remnants of last week's superstorm Doksuri flooded Beijing for the 4th straight day on Tuesday, even as another typhoon approached the eastern coast. More than 50,000 people in the city have been evacuated so far, according to state media. Meanwhile, Typhoon Doksuri has now submerged low-lying villages in the northern Philippines. In Bulacan province, north of Manila, residents were forced to travel by small wooden boats after incessant downpours inundated roads and caused floodwaters to swell up to 7 feet deep in low-lying areas. Despite the flooding, some parts of life have continued as normal in the Philippines. Incredible footage from the islands here of a wedding going ahead in knee-high waters at a church in Malolos. The video shows guests applauding as the bride walks down the aisle. And a large snake has caused play at a cricket match in Colombo in Sri Lanka.
Oh gosh, look at that. Oof. One thing that frightens me. I just don't want to be anywhere close. Snake in the grass.
The snake, believed to be a non-venomous Pityus mucosa maximus, or rat snake, interrupted a game between Gol Titans and Dambulla Ora.
Exit the field. It's a massive one, right?
Looks a massive one. Who's the 4th umpire? He's a brave guy.
Big one like that as well. That must be a first. This type of a hold-up. This is serious business here. So you've got to be very careful now.
Local media reported that wildlife officials were called upon to move the snake back to its natural habitat, and play did resume after that. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel's studios in Lagos.
Thanks, Simon. It's time for sports. Lauren James produced quite a sensational individual performance as England entertained and swept aside China to book their place in the last 16 of the Women's World Cup as Group D winners earlier today in Adelaide. The result sees the Lionesses finish with maximum points from 3 games to set up the anticipated encounter with Nigeria's Super Falcons in the last 16 on Monday, August the 7th. Meanwhile, reigning champions United States survived a huge scare to reach the last 16 of the Women's World Cup after a goalless draw against Portugal, who were unlucky to claim a sensational win at Eden Park that would have taken them through instead. The U.S. struggled to impose themselves against the debutants, and Portugal almost won the game in injury time when substitute Ana Capeta hit the post. On Wednesday, August the 2nd, reigning champions, African champions, I should say, South Africa will be aiming to become the 2nd African team to advance to the knockout stage when they face Italy. With a point from 2 matches and Italy on 3 points, the South Africans will progress if they defeat the Italians, while Sweden are already through to the round of 16. They will face Argentina in another Group G match, amongst other fixtures at the World Cup. And that's it on Sports News. Thank you for watching. I'm Jeffrey Zanga. Millicent is back to you.
Thanks, Jeffrey. And the main news again. A small aircraft on test flights crashed today on a road in the Ikeja area of Lagos, went up in flames, but the 2 persons on board were rescued, taken to hospital for treatment. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, who visited the scene of the crash, praised emergency responders for their prompt action. And that's the news at 10 tonight. Many thanks for watching. I'm Melissa Walker. Have a good night and stay safe.